What's good, people? This is Philly Fan 1987, and this is Bleeding Green Daily with another video coming at you. So we've had at least 2 days to process everything. Initially, a lot of people, a good portion of the fan base probably was pissed off because the Eagles had 6 picks. You had already were under the impression that 3 quarterbacks would be taken within the first 10 picks, and we had this inkling that a generational talent could be had at pick number 6. So with that in mind, I'll say what everyone was thinking. Everyone was thinking, Howie can't screw this up. There's no way that Howie can screw this up, because at 6, you have Pitts, you have Chase, you have Smith, and it might be a little bit of a reach, but you also could have taken Waddle. And even if you didn't go in any of those directions, there's still a lot of talent right there in that position at 6. There was no way for the Eagles to screw this up. Howie Roseman said, "Hold my beer." That's pretty much what he said. He traded back out of the top 10, and I kind of had already had an inkling that things weren't going to go our way. I didn't know that we would trade out of top 10, but just draft history, draft philosophy, knowing that over the past 30 years they had only taken offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and quarterback in the top 10, it's hard to fathom that they would do anything else. And then you can even go back and further and see in different drafts where this was the philosophy. It was the philosophy, and it hasn't changed, regardless of whether Joe Banner was here, regardless of whether Andy Reid was GM, regardless of whether Chip Kelly was here, regardless of whether Howie Roseman was running the show. This has been the Eagles' philosophy. So I didn't allow myself to get hyped up with the Chase to the Pitts. All of them are great talents, and it's good. It's great to picture, imagine, and think about what these guys can do in our system. But if you know the philosophy and you know what we've done over the past 30 years, it's not a coincidence. It's very easy to see that we're not going to change that up, especially with Howie and Lurie still here, and they've both been here a good portion of the time within that 30-year time frame. So it's really difficult to believe that with 2 key players in this draft philosophy, and people who have been here almost close to about 30 years. No, Lurie's been here 30 years or more, but Howie maybe a little off by a little bit. But they both spent a great time here. Lurie learned under Banner and Heckert, so the combination of those two and having the same philosophy, it'd be rather difficult to believe that an understudy of those two would have a different philosophy. So, in my mind, if we were at 6, we were either going to stay put and take a quarterback, move up and take a quarterback, or take an offensive lineman. And offensive lineman really didn't make sense because we're stacked at offensive line, and whoever we took at offensive line that high would have been sitting on the bench. There was no defensive line talent that was that high worth taking. So realistically, for me, if you're staying put, quarterback was the pick, or we were going to move up for quarterback. That fits the philosophy, the draft philosophy. So that's why I didn't allow myself to get hyped up about Pitts or all these other people, because there's nothing. It's really difficult to figure out what the Eagles would do at pick 15, at pick 21, at any other spot in the draft. But if we're talking top 10, they're not going away from philosophy. So, with that said, in the last video, I already talked about the trade. 49ers are now in spot 3. They got that spot from Miami. Miami gets a 3rd round pick and 2 first round picks in the next 2 drafts, and they moved down to 12. But right after that happened, I think it was really a three-way trade, but we heard about it in broken parts. So they traded that 12th pick to the Philadelphia Eagles and gave us a first round pick next year, swapped their 4th round pick with our 5th round pick, and got spot number 6. So now they're still in the top 10. Miami's at 6, and we are in spot 12. And I said, and I mentioned in the video yesterday, that if we moved out of the top 10, it was because we could not identify a person worth drafting in the top 10 that fit our philosophy. Like I said, there's no defensive talent good enough in the top 10 to be taken with a top 10 pick. Offensive lineman would not have made sense because the guy would not be starting on the offensive line from day one, because you're not taking Lane Johnson out. You're not taking Mailata out. So if you took a tackle that high, he's not benching one of those premier talents who's already proven they can play for him. So he would be riding the bench at Pitt 6, which is a no-go. And then quarterback, I'm sure they identified a quarterback that they were interested in. Rumor said it was Zach Wilson. We don't know. All we know is that there was word that they tried to get up to the 3rd pick, and maybe they realized Zach Wilson was going to be taken at 2. So if you wanted one of these guys and you really were going after one of these guys, you had to get in front of the Falcons, because the Falcons have been rumored to want a quarterback as well. Pick 3 ensures that you get one of those top 3 quarterbacks. So it could have been Zach Wilson. It could have been that they like Trey Lance a lot, but they didn't want to allow the Falcons to get up. You had to get above the Falcons in order to get Trey Lance. Or even if you want Justin Fields, you have to get above the Falcons if you think that they're going to take the quarterback. So now if you can't get to spot 3, and you don't want to give up enough draft capital because you still want to build, it only makes sense to move out of the top 10 if you have not identified anybody that you like so much or think is worth a position that you think is worth taking in the top 10. So they decided, okay, we can't get a quarterback we've identified, then we'd be sitting here and taking a player that they don't value as high position-wise going in the top 10. As I said before, I don't think they value taking a receiver that high or a tight end that high. And given the history of not giving major contracts or second contracts to receivers or tight ends, based on their history, it kind of makes sense to not take a generational talent in those 2 positions if you're not going to give them that second contract that they're going to demand. You're not going to pay them. You're not going to keep them. You're going to kind of recycle them out. It's kind of like the running back position. People aren't valuing running backs as high. So even though there might be a generational talent like Zeke Elliott at 4, you only have certain teams that will find that position so valuable that they take it, even though the player is a great and generational player. So I think they kind of see wide receiver and tight end kind of the same. It doesn't matter if they're generational talent if you're not going to pay up the money and you don't value the position as much, or if you value other positions a little bit more. I can kind of understand why you value the trenches. The trenches keeps the quarterback clean, and it stops the opposite quarterback from being able to do things. These positions are seen as game changer positions that can win you games and win you championships. So the trenches is what they value. That's what they spend a whole bunch of money on. That's where they keep the most players at. That's why in top 10 they value those players a little bit more than other players. And I can kind of understand that mindset, because if you keep the quarterback clean on offense and your offensive line is capable of doing such, the quarterback can get the ball to your playmakers. But if you've got a Megatron and, let's say, Stafford can't stay healthy and can't stay clean in the pocket, it doesn't matter that you have this Corvette or this sports car out here playing if your quarterback can't get to him because he's not clean or because you don't have a great quarterback. So I think they value the quarterback position in the trenches a little bit more than they do the other positions. And then in terms of defense, if you can stop the other quarterback, it really doesn't matter what they have out there, another Corvette, a Mustang, or whatever your sports car fave is. It just insert that in there. It doesn't matter if you have that car out there if you can't drive it. So yeah, I think that's how they look at that position, and that's why they look at that. They don't mind spending that money with top 10 picks, because those 10 picks are, I guess, franchise-changing picks for them, versus having a wide receiver or a running back or a tight end. So while I get the philosophy, it's not going to make for sexiness in terms of talent and positional players, because what it really means is we're never ever going to take the Megatrons of the world if they're in top 10 of the draft. We'll only take them if they happen to fall to us outside of the top 10. So that's what that says, that's what it means, and that's what it looks like. So what does that say for us at 12 though? 12 would be outside of the top 10. So obviously you still have to consider the philosophy, because you're still pretty close to top 10. But you're out of the top 10 and you're out of the top 10 money. I think things would open up right there. Typically, a lot of times we tend to get our receivers in the teens. I think teens is where we got Jeremy Maclin. Teens is where we got Aguilar, if I remember correctly. So I think they would be more so willing to draft a receiver at that position, well, at spot 12, than they would have in the top 10. Now, like I said before in the other videos, do not ask me why a receiver is not the go-to move at 6, but it's the go-to move at 12. Don't know. You really would have to talk to those people and get an understanding of why that is. I kind of understand from their game changer and franchise move guys in terms of quarterback, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, but I don't know. If you already have all those things, which we don't, but what I'm saying is, if we've been a team that already had those things and had this draft philosophy, would they risk doing something different? Now, I don't think we've ever been in a place where we can see that, because we've always had gaps at those positions. So I'm not sure. But at 12, I think there is still hope, because there's something different about this draft that may not have taken place in a draft since the Donovan McNabb draft. There are going to be 3, potentially 4, potentially 5 quarterbacks taken before we draft. You've got the Jags, the Jets, the 49ers, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Broncos, potentially Miami, but after moving out of 3, I don't think so. Washington Redskins all want a quarterback, or all have a question mark at the quarterback, and then add the Patriots. So you got all these people who are going to be pining to get one of these top 5 quarterbacks. So usually you would have a top 10 picks, maybe 1 or 2 quarterback goals, and then there's still about 8 franchise changing guys in non-quarterback positions that could be had, and 1 or 2 of those guys drop. In this scenario, if 4 or 5 quarterbacks go, then you've got really 10 guys who are non-quarterbacks that will take some kind of slip or dive down into the next batch. Of at least 5 of those people are going to be outside of the top 10. So let's say 5 quarterbacks go in the first 10 picks, and then you've got 5 generational talent guys who are not quarterbacks going in the next 5 picks. So that would mean you have 5 guys outside of the top 10 going, and the Eagles just happen to be at 12, so they would be right there, right there to get one of the next 5 guys who are not generational talents at quarterback. I screwed that up. You'd have 5 guys who are non-quarterbacks who would have been in the top 10 outside of the quarterback position. So technically we're still in position to get a top 10 guy who is not a quarterback. So that should help us, and that should work out for our benefit. Now, most likely you lose Chase. Most likely you lose Pitts. I would assume 2 of the tackles are gone. That still leaves you with a good portion of people. You still got Horn available. You still got Surtain available, depending on Parsons' legal situations. Parsons is there. You still got Waddle. You still, I don't know if I said Surtain, but Surtain, you still got guys there who could be generational talents, and that would fall to you in 12. And I was reading an article the other day, and we have a 2nd round pick that's pretty early, and we have about 11 picks. We could take one of those picks and move back up into the 1st round and potentially walk away with 2 1st round talents in the draft. And if that's the case, you're talking about 2 1st round talents in this draft and potentially 3 1st round talents in the next draft next year. So you're talking about adding potentially, depending on if we make that 2nd round move and if we keep all 3 of our 1st round picks, if Carson does what he does, you're potentially talking about 5. And even if you don't move up into the 1st round, that's still an early pick in the 2nd round, which usually still has some 1st round talent dropping at that point. You still have the potential to walk away with 5 guys who are ranked in the 1st round, who are ranked as 1st round talent. Imagine adding 5 1st round picks, or 5 guys who are ranked in the 1st round, having 1st round talent within the next 2 years of the draft. Imagine that. And if you picked correctly, and these are really talented guys who fit our system, you go from having 1 Pro Bowler on the team since 2014 to potentially having 5. And those 5 guys change in offense or defense, or could potentially change both. Let's say you had 3 on defense and 2 on offense. You potentially change both sides of the ball really quickly. So that's where I'm at with it. It sounds bad at first when you think about it. And if you really wanted Chase or you really wanted Pitts, yeah, it sounds really bad. But from a team standpoint, potentially adding 5 players who are ranked in the first round, or even if they decide to move up and get a quarterback and use 2 of those, having 4 players in the who are ranked as first round talent is still good. I would think that they would have to use 2 first round picks and maybe a first round pick the next year to move up and take a generational quarterback for the 2022 draft. I think that's still really good as well. I don't see it. I don't see it being a problem for real. As long as we make the right picks, as long as we scout, as long as they're working as a collaboration, and how we will actually pick the player that they collaborate with and decide together, and not how we go on rogue as usual. Forget scouting, forget what we said, or going with just the team and the coaches after allowing your scouts to write up all these things. As long as we pick correctly, we could come away with a pretty good team within the next 2 years. Philly Fan 1997, Bleeding Green Daily, I'm out.